people in my phone, welcome or welcome back. Welcome to another reading vlog. I've decided to mood read my TBR for a week because there are so many books on my shelves at the moment that I really want to get to. I'm only halfway through East of Eden, so I'm going to be fitting in reading that around the rest of my reading schedule this week. The first book I'm going to be starting with is Release Me by Tahira Mafi. Me and my best friend are going to be buddy reading this because we're buddy reading the entire Watch Me series. We both really enjoyed Shatter Me, so it seemed like a rite of passage to read this series together. I did get Watch Me physically, but I don't really like having too many romance books on my shelves, and I've not got space on the shelf that I'd put it on, so I got Release Me on my Kindle. Release Me is 400 pages and we're going to start it today. We're going to go to a park and do a little reading day, but I'm about to go and buy some snacks and then we're going to go to the park. I'm currently on page 204 of Release Me. I thought I would give a reading update because I know that for the rest of the day I'm just going to binge read this book and finish it. I don't know if it's because I haven't read a more YA fantasy in such a long time, or if it's because I'm also reading East of Eden. A lot of the things that are being said in this book I'm finding a little bit cringy. I'm still thoroughly enjoying my time whilst reading it, so that's not necessarily a problem. But sometimes someone will say something and it just feels quite out of place or just a little bit strange. I think it's very in character for certain characters to stay out of this very YA tone. I mean, Aaron Warner himself is kind of distinguished compared to the rest of them. I'm also feeling like a lot of it is, of course, reminiscent of Shatter Me, but some of the parallels are just too clear-cut in comparison to the first. I mean, the fact of the plot is that it's this insane girl who's trying to run from her crazy parents or the re-establishment, and she's got this sister that she wants to save and she's in love with this man. It feels so similar to Shatter Me that a lot of the time I'm kind of, I know what's going to happen, and when the characters say, there was something like Kenji said, like, this happens once in a lifetime, like Warner he was lucky. I was thinking, of course you're saying that because they're going to get together at some point in the series and it's, oh, lucky them. So I feel like a lot of it, I mean, I can overlook the fact that it's cringy or it's simplistic because it's a YA series, you know, like it's a Shatter Me continuation. I don't know what I was expecting. I'm enjoying it so much. I can read 100 pages of this in an hour. We didn't read anything at our reading date, but when I got home I read the first 100 pages. I read 100 pages when I woke up this morning. I might go and read some more of East of Eden now just to get more of a chunk read, and then I will probably sit down and finish reading Release Me. I finished reading Release Me by Tahira Mafi a couple of days ago. I think I'd give it 3.5 stars. I stand by what I said before, that it's a YA dystopia, so it's not the most impressive thing I've ever read. Although I know I said it feels very much like an archetype of Aaron and Juliet from the Shatter Me books, there is definitely a uniqueness to the story. It ended on such a cliffhanger. I think the third book in the series comes out in September. I will be picking that up the day that it's released and binge reading it. I think as well it's interesting that in this book particularly, it looks a lot at governmental surveillance and cameras. There's a lot of references and scenes where security systems are overpowered, and also I feel like there's this implicit reference to AI, but not in the way of like internet and generative AI that we're used to and we hate in our current society, but mainly the idea of robots and robotification of human beings. I'm sure that there's an article that I can read up on that, which I might do. I'm going shopping today. I'm hopefully going to pick up a book that I want to read next. It released a couple of days ago, so I'm going to go book shopping, see if I can find it, and if I can, then hopefully I'm going to read it really soon. I just got back from the cafe. I read We Were Forbidden by Jacqueline Hartman cover to cover. I was probably in there for about an hour and a half and the book is just over 80 pages. I had so much fun reading this book. So it's split into the 3 short stories. The first one is a group of soldiers walking through the woods and they don't really know when their mission is going to end. That read so much like I Who Have Never Known Men. Of course I've said that I want to do a reread of I Who Have Never Known Men, but reading that short story of about 20 pages made me realise how desperately I missed Jacqueline Hartman's writing style. The main premise of these 3 short stories is the idea of despair and deconstructing systemic oppression. It says on the blurb, each plumbing the depths of that most necessary human instinct, defiance. But you don't really realise it until you're reading these 3 stories, and they're so expertly crafted to match this theme but match it so distinctly between themselves. The first one, like I said, is The Soldiers in the Woods. The second one is autobiographical about Hartman's own life in school. And then the third one describes a love affair. Reading all 3 in one sitting was amazing. There are so many brilliant quotes in this, just expanding the idea of humanity and what that means. I think especially the first one has a lot of themes about humanity because, like I Who Have Never Known Men, it's characters walking through the woodlands, not really understanding their mission. There's a passage at the very beginning of the story which I think really links to I Who Have Never Known Men, and is a reason that maybe people won't like this short story collection or this one in particular, because it looks a lot at the idea of questions and being unanswered. It's on page 5 of this Vintage Classics edition. It says, "That question still sparked our interest. Was there anyone left to deliver orders? And if those who had issued ours were dead, did we still have to obey them? What was the point of our strict compliance if the world where the decisions had been made no longer existed? We were living under the law of a world that might have disappeared. Were we not mad? But if we were wrong and there were still leaders, if we disobeyed, we would have been deemed to have deserted, to have abandoned the mission and failed those who relied on us. Were we the last?" We always came back to that question because the very purpose of our existence depended on the answer. The ideas of questions and things being unanswered is so integral and intrinsic to this idea of defiance. And I think especially in this first short story, which is called The Arden Forest, it's so brilliant because it's looking at the internal and it's looking at almost this introspective defiance rather than in the following stories where it's much more physical and outwardly. The second one uses silence as defiance, and then the third one is looking at criminal activity. So I think that's what I like so much about Jacqueline Hartman's writing style, is that she looks so internally at the human condition and the psyche and just how we live our lives. Honestly, this collection, 4 stars. I think that her writing style and her cadence is just so brilliant. I just need more of Jacqueline Hartman's books to be translated to English now so I can read them. I think for now I'm going to edit a vlog, maybe read some of East of Eden depending on how much I get done. And this evening I'm going to be watching Love Island and doing some crochet. I've been getting into making crochet book sleeves again. This is one I've made already, so opens up, put a book in there. And then this is the one that I'm doing at the moment, so I need to fold it together properly. I'm not sure what book I'm going to read next after finishing East of Eden, so the next time you see me I will have hopefully picked out another book to read. I went to a coffee shop this morning and got a drink and did some reading. I'm currently on page 86. So I read that in probably an hour and a bit. I thought I was going to be reading this quicker than I am, but I'm not complaining. It's a really interesting book, and the premise of it, of course, I feel like everyone's going to know. It's a trad wife or a housewife woman who is an influencer. The book starts in the present and it's like her daily life, so you're integrated into what she's doing, how her life actually is, and then how she represents it on social media. So as she's going through her day, it's really interesting because you hear her in a monologue on what she's thinking of things. Like she says about the chickens was something that stood out to me, that when she's talking about the chickens, she calls them the chickens, and then when she's recording something, she says like, "Hey ladies," instead of "these are the chickens." So it's interesting that even the most minute details, it's almost like a flip switches for her social media side. Also, it's interesting because we're looking at, of course, motherhood and being a wife, but also authority and how she can kind of switch that and force herself to be in that position of power over herself. Also, this is heavily integrated in religion, and she is a very orthodox Christian, so set in her faith. In her mind, that's kind of not the same. She's more herself in her mind than she is in her physical form, which of course is like everyone, but it's interesting to have it from this very niche and nuanced perspective. I might do some little things in my room. I've got some new decorations. So I've got these 3 shelves next to my bed. This bottom one is for my current reads. The second one is all of my journals. And then the top one is books that I've borrowed. I also put up some more frames. I also bought myself some new flowers. I think it's agapanthus from what I remember from my garden centre knowledge, but I hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. How exciting! I'm so grateful and so happy, and I thought I needed to reward myself, so I bought some pretty flowers. But yeah, I'll probably see you later when I have some more thoughts on Yesteryear. I finished reading Yesteryear a few days back now, but I forgot to film an update. I have posted a full review on Instagram if you're interested in a more meticulously crafted, well thought out response to this book. I ended up giving Yesteryear 4 stars. I think as the book progressed, I was more addicted to it, which is interesting because the quote that I've chosen from this book for my long form review is, "The goal of an influencer is not to be lovable and is not to be unbearable. The goal is to be both at once, in other words, addicting," which definitely sums up the ideas in this book about social media and influencing, and I think this digital culture that is having this, like, I don't want to say continual resurgence because it is just now ever present in our day-to-day life. I think it's so heavily integrated into contemporary existence, but this book of course is at once contemporary fiction and historical fiction in the way that it dissects these different timelines. I think that the formatting of this book and the way that it was structured as this past, present, future, it was really interesting, and I think that the way that Natalie fluctuates through these different explanations of her time travel, her progression into the 1800s was really interesting. There are lots of interpretations from Natalie, and as the reader you also rotate through these different understandings, and it goes from like time travel to her believing that she's on some kind of reality TV show, and also because it's so grounded in this religious context, she also thinks that it's a test from God and she has to be this completely subservient female Christian woman. And it was really interesting going between her mental voice and her daily actions in terms of whether or not she considers herself to be conforming to this ideal. Because of this, I feel like there was only a certain amount of empathy that I could extend to her. She is both the worst person in this book in the way that she treats people, but also simultaneously a victim to these different systemic manners of oppression that she has to deal with. But then also the book looks at nature and nurture and whether or not she is self-serving in these different perspectives that she has, or if she was raised in a certain environment. It looks a lot at domestic relationships and the ideas of how these relationships can be captured, both in terms of her influencing and genuine captures on like photos, videos and social media, but also I feel like there was a capturing and like physical, I guess like nostalgic and memory-induced snapshots of life. The way she's living in the 1800s with this family and is continually getting snapshots and like brief snippets of memory from her contemporary life. The past and the present really overlap in her mentality. It looks, of course, very heavily at the idea of religious psychosis, and the characters in this book are so flawed. It was such a gripping read. I really wish that I had read this sooner. I bought it, I think it came out in April, and I think I bought it April-May time. I wish I had read it sooner, but regardless, one of the best books that I've read this year. And now I have to go on to what I think is going to be the final book of this reading vlog. I'm going to be starting what I think is the final book of this reading vlog, which is Perfume by Patrick Susskind. It's a really hot day. I'm gonna go for a hike. I'm hoping to sit down, find a bench opposite the lake and do some reading, or if not, sit and do some reading in the picnic area. This has been on my TBR for a short while now, and I knew that going into summer and especially July I wanted to get it read. So I think that this cover is stunning. It feels so much more gothic and me than the Penguin Modern Classic. I think this is one of Connie's favourite books ever, so I have to read it, I have to enjoy it, and I have to have thoughts. But yeah, I'm gonna go on my hike and I'm gonna start reading Perfume. I just finished reading Perfume. I finished it maybe 20 minutes ago. honest final thoughts, maybe 2 stars. I should have known from the start that I wasn't going to enjoy this. I didn't like the writing style. It's such a shame because I think it's such an interesting premise of this murderer who is scentless but he's obsessed with scent, and the way that Gwenwy kind of moves throughout this world in France and different women, and like his mannerisms and his character was very interesting, but I don't think that the prose or the narrative style was really for me. Also, there wasn't very much action. It focuses a lot more on, I mean, Patrick Suskind must have really researched perfume because artistically and scientifically there's a very clear like exemplification of how perfume is created, and there are so many very lush descriptions of the behind the scenes of being a perfumer and creating the different perfumes and scents. But we'd be in these scenes for so long that I would forget what was happening, what the point of the scenes were. I didn't want it to be more horror, like I didn't want more gore necessarily, but I think a lot of the horror or like the murder aspects were behind the scenes, like you didn't see them. And also I wish that there was more of an explanation behind his scentlessness, because there was so little explanation to back a lot of the science in this book that it felt like magical realism, and I feel like it would have been better if the book had lent into one or the other. I am glad that I've read it, and in finishing this book I finished this reading vlog. Although I wish we could have ended on a better book, we had 3 other really good books that I loved. I hope you enjoyed this video. I quite enjoyed the process of me reading my TBR. I've just started reading gifted books for a week for my next reading vlog. I've got some other books that have been on my radar for a little bit that I'm quite excited to read. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I've been having good discussions with people on Instagram and TikTok. Some of the content related to the books I've read in this video I'll link in the description in case you're interested. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!